Good afternoon and welcome to Pittsburgh City Council's public hearing for Tuesday, September 21st, 2021, relative to Bill 2021-1720. Will the clerk please read the title of the bill?
Bill 1720, Ordinance amending the Pittsburgh Code Title 9, zoning Articles 1 through 9, Title 4, Article 3, Title 13, zoning Chapter 1301, making various amendments to the zoning code related to stormwater management.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And as we are still meeting in a hybrid format, we have some people joining virtually and we have some guests joining in person. So please bear with us as we get through this. For the record, we are here joined today by a few guests, and the first order of business will be an introduction by Martina Battistone and Andrew Dash from the Pittsburgh City Planning Department. And following that, we will have testimony from our registered speakers. So I'm pleased today to introduce Director Andrew Dash and Martina Battistone.
Thank you, Councilperson. So the hearing that we're here for today is relative to an update to Title 13 of the city's code, which is the Stormwater Management Code. This is a follow-up to work that we had done back in 2019, where we had created Title 13 and moved all stormwater regulations into one title of the city's code. Over the past year and a half, we have been working with the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority, PWSA, and others to update that code. That code is primarily around new development and regulations that new development will have to undertake as a part of their applications to build within the city. And so for the details on the process and the details of the code that will be presented to you, I'll turn it over to our principal environmental planner in the department, Marty Battistone.
Thanks, Director Dash. I will do a quick overview, repeat a little bit about what Director Dash said, and go over the changes being proposed by this code update. So again, this has been a joint effort with the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority, as well as a broad agency working group and stakeholder engagement. The prime consultant for this project is AKRF, who did similar work in Philadelphia. If you see the acronym SCORU, that is referring to this project, Stormwater Code and Ordinance Review and Update. So a little wordy. And like Director Dash said, this follows the update that we were mandated by to be compliant with Act 167 in 2019 when we created Title 13 for all stormwater management regulations. The objective of this project as a whole was to update the city's stormwater management code, which is everything from consolidating existing content that's scattered throughout the code, eliminating conflicts and overlap between those various code sections, and then ensuring that our stormwater management regulations support the goals that the city and PWSA have in managing stormwater, reducing flooding, helping eliminate basement backups, as well as our compliance goals with various agencies. Another big piece of this project is to develop more resources for those who are navigating the stormwater management plan submission process at the city. So creating a design manual that either engineers or developers can use that really outlines all the requirements and submission requirements for the stormwater management plan. And then a lot of this comes with process improvements and different within the city and across various agencies. A little timeline of our project: we began in February of 2020, so we've been doing this for a while. And, fortunately, a lot of the work is pretty technical. And so they were able to continue doing that over the course of COVID, and we were able to adjust a lot of our engagement. We took this to Title IX changes to Planning Commission in July. And then today is obviously our City Council public hearing for all sections of the code. And then the estimated implementation of this code update would be in March of 2022. Again, just an overview of the work that's happened to date. The AKRF, our consultants, did an incredibly deep analysis of all code that touches on stormwater in pretty much any way. Same with all of the regulatory requirements that the city has, including our joint MS4 permit. They really looked at current processes and how they could be improved as people navigate the zoning development review process, as well as permits, inspection, enforcement, things like that. There was a lot of work between various agencies and really trying to pull all that together to have some policy recommendations to improve both the process and as well as the requirements. So some of that engagement, like I said, we had an agency working group, which included representatives from the City Law Department, Permits, Licensing and Inspection, the Zoning Department, Planning Department, Department of Public Works, DOMI, Department of Mobility and Infrastructure, and then from external agencies, the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority, Allegheny County Conservation District, Allegheny County Health Department. So there were at least 5 formal meetings and a lot of touch bases with the various agencies in between. We also had a stakeholder group, which consisted of engineers, developers, architects, various community organizations, watershed groups, and some of the larger landowning institutions such as colleges and hospitals. There were 3 formal meetings of that stakeholder group with over 123 attendees, and then an additional focus group. Additionally, we did have a public-facing Engage PGH page where people could pose questions, they could review materials as they were developed, as well as we sent postcard mailers to over 30,000 property owners twice per Title IX requirements for the zoning code changes that are being proposed. So getting into the content, for Title IX, which is the zoning code, we are proposing relocating the stormwater management overlay districts, which currently reside there, into Title 13, just in an effort for consolidation. So those are specific Act 167 release rates, which mean that certain areas of these 3 watersheds, the Monongahela, Gertie's Run, and Squaw Run, have areas where they may have lower release rates for developments that are having to submit stormwater management plans. So we're just proposing moving those to Title 13. There are specific sections of Title IX that only impact the Uptown Public Realm zoning district and the Riverfront zoning district. And so for those elements, we are proposing the elimination of the small project stormwater submission, which is for projects in those 2 zoning districts between 500 and 5,000 square feet of disturbance. We're proposing adjusting the performance points for rainfall from 1.5 to 2 inches to better match the requirements, so that those who are seeking performance points for going above and beyond are actually doing so. And then just providing some clarity on the differences between the Riverfront zoning district riparian buffer zone and those relating to stormwater management. And again, just some cleanup in terms of coordinating the referencing between Title IV, Title IX, Title X, and some other state requirements. In terms of Title 13, which again is the stormwater management section of the code, we are not proposing changing the threshold for when stormwater management requirements come into play. So as it exists now and as it's being proposed, stormwater management is required for developments that disturb 10,000 square feet of land, or if they're under that, but they're creating 5,000 square feet of impervious area. Those are the times when stormwater management plan submission is required. Additionally, in Uptown and Riv, that threshold is 5,000 square feet of disturbance, and that's current and is being proposed to remain the same. Another sort of big piece of the code update is the use of a climate change projection model for sizing of the stormwater best management practices. So, trying to better account for the more intense and frequent rain events and how developments are managing their stormwater when they're doing all their calculations. We're proposing the creation of something called the public health and safety release rates, which are specific areas of the city where we know that flooding is a really big issue. The creation of a stormwater design manual, which should be hopefully a really great resource for those who are navigating the stormwater management plan process. And then creating a two-step approval process to just make sure that everything is more predictable for those who are going through it. And then a totally new inspection and enforcement program under PLI. This is not completely comprehensive, but largely comprehensive list of the kind of substantial improvements in Title 13 that are being proposed. And so I'll touch on a few of these. So as I said, we are proposing the use of a future climate change rainfall projection model so that those who are doing all the calculations for sizing the stormwater management facilities would utilize this data source, which would, we feel, better account in addressing, like I said, those more frequent and intense rainfall events that we know lead to flooding and basement backups. And so this is a model from Carnegie Mellon that's specific to Pittsburgh, and that accounts for, really kind of everything that we're seeing locally. It also would continue to be updated to reflect current conditions and how those are projected, which would make it easier for us to not have to update the code constantly. And then these public health and safety release rates are specific areas throughout the city that, we looked at the sewer system capacity, flooding complaints, just additional hydraulic modeling, and identified the areas of the city that are most prone to flooding and basement backups, which is approximately 25% of the city. And those areas would have higher release rate requirements, meaning that projects that are hitting the threshold in those areas would have to actually reduce the peak rate of runoff instead of just show that they're not increasing it. And then on the sort of administrative side, we are looking at a two-step process for stormwater management plan approvals. And that is in an effort to try and create a little bit more of a streamlined process for when stormwater management approval is happening. For example, we're proposing a conceptual plan approval that projects would have to have before going to Planning Commission. There's also going to be a host of preferred practices, so different stormwater facilities that we know have the highest benefit, both in terms of stormwater management, but also, providing other amenities. And so we would provide an expedited review for projects that are utilizing those practices. There's also going to be more flexibility for developers to do some volume trading on properties that they own. So if a site is really constrained, they'll have an option to, to manage that stormwater in a slightly different area. Additionally, there's going to be a lot more guidance on paying an in lieu fee to the Stormwater Management Trust Fund for those projects that can demonstrate that due to, certain site characteristics such as contaminated soils, that they're unable to meet their stormwater management requirements on site. And like I said, PLI will begin an inspection and enforcement program for stormwater facilities. And that's going to be one of the bigger changes. And so for the Stormwater Design Manual, which is this sort of supplemental resource for the projects that are working through the Stormwater Management Plan, this is just an outline of what it's going to include and a sample graphic from a similar document in Philadelphia, which basically, shows if someone is confused about what their requirements are, it's going to show them, based on the watershed of the property, the size of the project, and a lot of, other factors. It will lay out their requirements very clearly, which we know was something that in our stakeholder group we heard that clarity and predictability were something that they really wanted to see. And so just also thinking, in terms of feedback, just kind of wanted to provide a few points of clarifications from some of the public comments and questions that we've gotten. So this code update is not connected to the PWSA stormwater fee. There's no change to the threshold of the stormwater management plan requirement. So again, that's that 10,000 square feet of land disturbance and up, or the creation of 5,000 square feet or 5,000 square feet of disturbance in the RIV in Uptown. But because of the size of those thresholds, this does not impact the average homeowner in terms of doing, projects on a typical residential lot. Additionally, just that this stormwater management code update is not associated with a physical stormwater management project, and there's no inherent cost, like right off the bat for this code. And just to emphasize again that this is all in an effort to better manage stormwater across the city in reducing basement backups and flooding. So to close it out, just sort of the road to implementation. Again, we're looking at an effective date of March 2022 to have these kick into gear. First step is City Council approval, and then once we have that, we can finalize the design manual and do outreach and education with the engineering and development community, who are the ones who go through the stormwater management plan process. Institutionalize that two-step approval process that also allows PLI the time to hire and train the necessary staff for that inspection and enforcement piece, and then do the necessary work with other agencies to provide clarity on roles and responsibilities for all of our compliance needs. So I'm happy, I know it was a lot really quickly. I'm happy to take any questions. And my email is there for any additional comments or questions.
And I think overall, just want to note that, we think that this will clarify the procedures and simplify the process for developers, while at the same time creating more stringent regulations around stormwater management and how developments manage stormwater to be able to better protect surrounding residents in those watersheds and sewer sheds. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let the record reflect that we have been joined by Councilwoman Deborah Gross and Councilman Bobby Wilson. So I'm sure we will get into questions from council members later, but we will now move on to testimony from the registered speakers. And when you speak, please give your name and address for the public record. And each speaker will have 3 minutes to address council. I will announce the person who's up next and then the person on deck after them. So first registered speaker is Kim Stelmack, followed by Marianne Major. Do we have Kim Stelmack online, virtually or in person? Do not see them on our attendees list. Okay, if not, we will move on to our second registered speaker, Marianne Major, followed by John Stephen. Not seeing Ms. Major here, we will move on to John Stephen, followed by Caitlin Schwering.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear.
Okay, great. Thank you. John Stephen, 330 2nd Street, Aspinwall. But I'm speaking to you this afternoon as coordinator of the Negley Run Watershed Task Force. Thank you to City Planning and the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority for the work to date on updating the Stormwater Code. It deserves to become law with a few more assurances for community participation and public education. When it comes to water, we Pittsburghers live in a world of plenty, but with that comes a need to steward it well, or it will end up where we don't want it, in basements, splashing down our green valleys and roadways, or pulling under bridges. A 21st century resilient urban water program needs new system-wide tools, and this code update is a beginning. First, the code update recognizes that we need to aim for a watershed system rather than a patchwork of parcels. We get too many intense storms and too much rain for private property building code tweaks to suffice. Larger institutions and parking lots and warehouses need to do more, and this update begins to define some of the realistic objectives and incentives for them to do so. Secondly, the use of future rainfall projections based on climate trends is important and an excellent addition. And other regions will certainly follow Pittsburgh's lead on this. One item that is missing is a commitment to public participation and process. PWSA and the city is launching a stormwater planning process, so that may be coming, but council can perhaps use this update process to reinforce community-based urban watershed efforts, such as the Negley Run Watershed Task Force or the watersheds of South Pittsburgh or other watershed groups. The task forces could be a powerful tool in the stormwater system. For instance, the public health and safety watersheds of concern have more restrictive flow rates, probably have task forces ready to work with the city, PWSA, and developers to implement and steward an effective separated stormwater system. Bring them into the process akin to how registered community organizations are being brought into development plan reviews. Another example, the two-step review process with approval of an initial plan. That process could include incentives for maybe more public and private collaboration during the design and engineering process to find ways to separate more stormwater from our sewer system upstream and downstream of the site. The third example, the code creates the potential for credits or offsets within microsheds by allowing credit for volume control downstream if the point of interest is also on property owned by the applicant. The common ownership requirement should be loosened to allow owners interested in developing offsets, such as green infrastructure, to sell these credits to developers in the microshed that need to reduce their stormwater.
Thank you, Mr. Stephen. Sorry to cut you off. Our next registered speaker is Caitlin Schwering, followed by Naomi Mullen. And I believe that Caitlin emailed us saying that she had to submit her testimony by email instead. So we will move on to Naomi Mullen, followed by Walter Belankis.
Good afternoon. This is Naomi Mullen from Bon Air. Hello. Shady trees, not shady deals in Bon Air. We have a solution for some of the watershed problems on Route 51. The impervious roof, concrete, and asphalt of Bon Air School can be removed. The previous blessing of a good elementary school has been empty for a decade. The school has become a curse. The neighborhood of Bon Air wants it torn down to absorb the rainfall. We want a green space in its place. The opportunity is now to allow water to go into Bon Air green space. Now to help all ages and stages of people to enjoy nature. Now to reduce raging rapids on Route 51. My sincere, consistent request is that City Council create a resolution to block zoning change and support a green space to replace Bon Air's school building. Do your part for the environment, reduce urban heat, reduce watershed to Route 51, increase green space to benefit all, protect the children at the playground. Let's make it wheelchair accessible to allow those who have poor access to nature the ability to enjoy it. Tear down problem buildings, not safe, stable neighborhoods. You want to reduce watershed to Route 51, and this is your opportunity to help that need. Shady trees, not shady deals. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next registered speaker is Walter Belankis, followed by Mary Belankis. And I believe these next few speakers are in person.
I'm Walter Belankis, Brentwood Avenue, Pittsburgh. I've lived there since 1956. Only time I wasn't there was with the military and the Marines in Vietnam. I've seen all kinds of changes in the neighborhood and the street. The only trouble is it's mismanaged, and you people, if you're going to do a program with water shedding, correct the problems that you have created. I have pictures of a clogged sewer. It's been there when you people, especially the sewer company, come out, they knew that this sewer is clogged. There's no water that can go in it, but you neglected it. How many calls did I make? Another thing, my street is slanted. All the water goes on to other people's property. I have pictures, so you can't say, well, he's just up there talking. I'll give it to Mrs. Reese to show that you people have to correct your present problems before you can go into a big spiel of all these codes and entitlements and everything, when you have to correct the present problems before you could go and do something else. Now, this ain't just on my street, it's other streets. And my gutters go right, not to the street, into my backyard. So I don't have no water coming in the sewer except for bathing, water, and washing clothes. So I don't be affected, but I get a notice I'm 150 feet from the so-called watershed, which is a political thing. All I'm telling you is send somebody up to look at the street, find out why there's a clogged sewer that no water can go in it and creates a water shield, and why the city is slanted. Then talk about the entitlements, storms, and Title IX and that. That's just like you're becoming a political state. I have refugees, retirees on my street. Are you going to go after them after 2022 because of the neglect on the street? I'm going to show you one thing. A neighbor, he has sandbags in front of his driveway and walkway because of the water problem in that street, and the sewer is clogged. I've called. I've talked to people who come up or from the sewer company. Oh, this is all politics. Ain't gonna do nothing. That's all I can say. It's just another talking points on your thing. As far as talking entitlements and all that stuff, it's double talk.
Thank you, Mr. Belankis. And we do have your contact information and your address, so we will make sure that the sewer is someone is sent out there to look at that and to address this concern of yours on the street. Next registered speaker is Mary Belankis, followed by our final speaker, Mrs. Della Pennywell.
Yes, I just want to say, my husband said everything that I've been thinking of. I don't know if there's any more, but our street is really a mess. I know I've lived up there for 45 years and I never seen it in this condition. There's water running down people's driveways, down the street, and it's all clogged up. I don't know what else to say. It's just terrible. I wish you people would help us control this. I know PWSA is gouging us for a lot of money. It seems like we always get an increase in the bills. That ain't right either. We pay our water bill, then we have to pay the PWSA bill, and it's always so sky high. Wonder what the problem is there. Every month or so, it seems to go up. Can't you reduce the bills? Can you help us? I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final speaker is Mrs. Della Pennywell.
Brenda, I told you, but I think I should say something. I'm concerned with my back of my house. There is a high cement wall, but it has all of these used holes in it. So the water from Dakota comes down and rushes down into my yard. And after a long time, about 3 years ago, I start getting water in the basement. And they're telling me that I need French drains everywhere. And so I don't understand why we should get the water from Dakota or further up. And I've had 2 stone walls down. It has ruined one side of my garage, my lower garage, and we can't figure out where the water is coming from. And that's what I'm concerned with, and that's why I'm here today. I thank you.
Thank you very much for being here.
You're welcome.
So having exhausted the public comment, I would like to open it up to the council members that we have here today in case there are questions, additional comments. I'll take it in the order of time that you join the meeting. So Councilwoman Gross, do you have any comments or questions for our guests today?
Well, it's a big set of changes to wrap our minds around. So I appreciate the bit of we have briefings at council and then the summary here. I'm glad to see that there is some difference in priority zones, right? So this notion that we know that some sewer sheds contribute far more greatly than other sewer sheds. You can literally live right across the street from each other, or be 2 properties across the street from each other, but your sinks, toilets, and downspouts and don't go to the same sewer outfall. They're like discrete systems, like branches of trees, right? There's one tree this way, one tree this way, even though they might terminate in houses right across the street from each other. And so the reductions that you do on one property may not actually decrease our sewer outfall as significantly as the ones that you do in a really high priority sewer shed. And I heard some concerns from some public testimony about those. And I'll just say that we know, for example, the A22 that is highlighted overfalls or outfalls or overflows sewage into the rivers at 1/10 of an inch of rain. That is a source shared by Councilwoman Strasburg and I, and we know that we've been trying to reduce the volume in that sewer shed. I'll say something that I always say, that, you know, we've been talking about stormwater for about 20 years, but we have seen in the last 8 years significant increases in new construction, and some of them in these very sensitive sewer sheds. And that I always ask when I am faced with the sewer modules, how much volume they're adding in water consumption, because that is also going into the combined sewers. So while when we started the conversation 20 years ago or more, we were looking at how stormwater causes those overflows, but we know that even in dry weather, the A22, for example, is full. It's full from the water use and the actual sewer, sewage. And so I just always like to remind ourselves that not all sewer sheds are the same, and that I think that we as a council should also be looking at how to capture some of the, not just stormwater, but sewer, like lower the sewer input, so lower water consumption, which is what is happening in Western states, right? They are adapting to low flow toilets. We haven't even begun to talk about that in the city of Pittsburgh. And it's kind of surprising to me when we know that we need to lower the sewage that reaches the rivers. And we know that we really have identified the sewer sheds that are full, even in dry weather. So I think that is just kind of future work that remains to be done. I was trying to follow along, and I'll probably have to save this for our discussion, but I do want to, I'll just note in the record here that I'm going to be asking questions or probably needing some more briefings on how the permitting happens. There seem to be just a lot of moving parts right now in terms of zoning approvals, building approvals, and now kind of like stormwater approvals, as well as sewer module approvals. Was already had a confusion at council with, it seems like sewer modules should not be hitting our agenda and are hitting it too early. And I just saw some legislation that was new papers today that Councilman Burgess wants some kinds of zoning to be granted, deemed approval and expedited with the council person's approval. It's new legislation we haven't even discussed yet. So I don't know how these things fit together, or if some of them actually don't work together. And so it's already confusing enough to try to visualize the development approval process. So I'll just give you a heads up that those will probably be part of my questions next week. Sorry about that, Councilwoman. Once I got started, I just kept going, but I do appreciate the public comments and look forward to more discussion. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilman Wilson, do you have any comments or questions?
Yes, and thank you, and thanks to all the commenters that came to the public hearing. I did have a question. I have residents that receive postcards, and I appreciate everyone that got me some answers on that. But I just had one outstanding question, because I know some of them are listening. So they receive postcards as homeowners to say, there will be this change in stormwater code, come to this public hearing because you are in a watershed. So these residents receive these cards, and I was kind of curious if the stormwater code that we're changing is to require properties that are 10,000 square feet or more to hold more water on site than they currently do, because they are required currently, from my understanding. Like, what's that engagement there for them? Is it just so that they're aware? Could you explain that for the public on why they receive those cards, if it doesn't really specifically relate to a homeowner in that way?
Yeah, Director Dash, I can take it, or so those specific watersheds, which, just as like a step back, a watershed is the whole area that drains to one specific point. So when we say the Monongahela River watershed, we're talking about every area to which a rainfall falls on there, that's eventually where it's ending up. And so Act 167 is a state act, and they have specific release rate maps, which currently live in Title IX, so our zoning code, for the Monongahela, Gertie's Run, and Squaw Run. So your residents were probably receiving it for Gertie's Run.
Correct.
And so those three watersheds have specific mapping overlays that live in the zoning code. And so we are required to notify them because it's technically a change to the zoning code map, because we are proposing pulling those from the zoning code and putting them in Title 13 in an effort for consolidation.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah,
why
no, I just wanted,
yeah, so that's why those residents were specifically notified, and we know that that's, I think, been part of the confusion, is that we want to do our due diligence and notify people as we're legally required to do, with the understanding that it's not necessarily something that they would come into interaction with in their day-to-day life.
okay, I just want to make that clear. Like, essentially, it's in trying to improve how their watershed would, be in the future. Like, that basically their watershed wouldn't create. It doesn't specifically relate to their own property, since they fall within, a much smaller square footage. But just to, be very public, and I guess by law, we have to send them this because there's a change to the code. So I just want to make that clear, because I know they're watching either on City Channel or on this YouTube live stream that we have now. So thanks. Appreciate all your time.
Yeah, that's an important point of clarity. So it is a citywide change, but those specific watersheds were notified just for the Title IX changes.
Thank you, Councilman. And my only comments are echoing what I said at the briefing that council members and staff received last week, which is, one, clarifying that, or I received clarity, and I just wanted to reiterate here that there are, in addition to a lot of new moving parts when it comes to permitting that Councilwoman Gross mentioned, there are a lot of moving parts when it comes to stormwater management citywide. This is one which is not only a cleanup of the code, but also a kind of a tightening of the code as well for larger development projects. And parallel to that is an effort by PWSA to come up with a stormwater management plan. And then concurrent to that is a petitioning of the Public Utility Commission by PWSA, which handles, among other things, stormwater and the water we use in our homes and businesses, to be able to charge a stormwater fee for controlling, having the resources to be able to put into controlling of stormwater, to help to cut down on the basement backups and to cut down on the sewage that's flowing into our rivers. So lots of different things happening at once. This is just one piece of that. So for anyone who is confused, I don't blame you. There's a lot happening here and a lot of entities working on one big kind of overarching issue. But I'm appreciative to city planning for the diligence and work that they've done on this project and this part of this sliver of stormwater management, and look forward to continuing the conversation and seeing how it all plays out, and ensuring that everyone gets the clarity that they need on the permitting end of this, which I think is probably the most confusing part of it. So thank you for being here today. And I have no further questions unless there's anything else that anyone would like to add, the good of the order. Okay, seeing nothing, we have exhausted the business of this public hearing, so I will move to adjourn the meeting. Okay, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.